17 years ago, Hawaii was among the first states to enact a medical cannabis program. Today, 8 dispensary licenses have been granted. Patients have their MMJ cards. The governor signed the bill expanding the program to include epilepsy, lupus, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis. Dispensaries are ready to open for business, but the high hopes of all concerned have been put on hold again. This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise. More than a year ago, another Insights moderator, Mahealani Richardson, sat here to introduce an Insights show about the launch of Hawaii's medical marijuana program. Let's take a look.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Mahealani Richardson. It's been a long and bumpy road to the fulfillment of a Hawaii law legalizing medical marijuana and providing for its distribution. The law was enacted more than 15 years ago. In fact, Hawaii was one of the first states to legalize medical marijuana. Only now is the state getting close to opening the door for dispensaries, and come July, patients are expected to have access to them.
Here we are, 2 days shy of 15 months later, and we are still expecting to see Hawaii's medical marijuana dispensaries opened sometime this summer. Last year, 8 companies were awarded a license to operate medical marijuana dispensaries in Hawaii. For more than 17,500 registered patients, these dispensaries mean easier access to the medical cannabis they need. 6 businesses have received state approval to begin growing medical-grade marijuana. 3 dispensaries also have marijuana ready to sell. Ongoing delays have been attributed to the lack of accreditation for labs testing the product. The Legislative Oversight Committee met yesterday. We'll have an update on that meeting. Could more delays result in severe financial hardships for the industry before their doors even open to patients? And what about other concerns? How will medical marijuana's eventual distribution in our community impact neighborhoods, consumers, doctors, and other businesses? And what about the new U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions? He's compared cannabis to heroin. He is not a supporter of medical marijuana. President Trump considers this a state issue, at least for now. Join tonight's panel discussion comprised of an operator of a medical marijuana dispensary, a physician licensed to prescribe medical marijuana, a parent of a consumer, as well as the state agency that maintains oversight of medical marijuana licensing. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet us your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guest. Keith Ridley is Chief of the Office of Healthcare Assurance with the Hawaii State Department of Health. In 2015, the medical marijuana dispensary licensing program was established under the Office of Healthcare Assurance. Prior to joining the state in 2008, Mr. Ridley was an independent healthcare consultant specializing in long-range planning and project management. Richard Ha is CEO of Lauola LLC and a longtime Hawaii Island farmer who was awarded one of the 8 licenses statewide to become a medical marijuana dispensary. He had just ended his previous farming operation before applying for the license and has set up the operation on his 600-acre farm in Pepe'ekeo. Dr. Clifton Otto is a retina specialist in private practice in Hawaii and a certifying physician with Hawaii's medical use of marijuana program. He was also a member of the Hawaii Dispensary Task Force and is an active advocate for protecting the state's authority to accept the medical use of marijuana. And Jari Sugano is a medical marijuana caregiver and has been advocating for patients, including her own 8-year-old daughter who suffers from a rare and catastrophic form of intractable epilepsy called Dravet syndrome. Ms. Sugano served on the Hawaii Medical Marijuana Dispensary Task Force and currently serves on the Act 230 Medical Marijuana Oversight Working Group. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Keith, we want to go directly to you and get to the bottom line. Why is this taking so long to open shop?
It's a lot more complex than anybody realized, even the state realized. Even the legislators have confided in us that the dates that they had initially put into the statute were unrealistic. They realize that it is much more complex, from developing the administrative rules that would essentially govern the implementation of the program, to contracting with a vendor for the state's seed-to-sale tracking system, to encouraging labs or private independent labs to apply for certification, to conduct the testing, to a host of other things. It's just taken a lot longer than people realized. We think we've done a very good job of putting it together. We've gone through some learning curves ourselves, but we also have had the opportunity to learn from other states, both not only their successes, but their failures. We've incorporated a lot of that into what we've done. So all of this just takes more time than anyone realized.
Realistically, when do you think the first patients will actually be able to make a purchase?
Well, we're always hopeful that it'll be sooner rather than later. And the key is not only having product available for sale, but having that product tested by the laboratories. So we're anticipating that a laboratory, at least one laboratory, will be certified by the end of this month. And we're hopeful that it could be even a little sooner than that, since we're approaching the end of the month now. And I don't think it'll be too long after that the testing will actually be completed and medical cannabis will be available to the consumer. When exactly that might be, partly is between the cannabis grower, the licensees, and the lab, as far as fulfilling that process, and then also being able to put those products into their retail stores. We only have one, out of the 8 licensees, there's only one retail store that we have inspected that would come closest to being ready to be open as soon as possible within the next several days, if that were to happen.
And where's that?
And that's on Maui. And so the other licensees are still developing. They're getting very, very close. So we would anticipate the second and possibly even the third retail outlet to be open, if not immediately behind the first, then within several days of that.
Richard, as a licensee, how has this process been for you? Is this, are there things that you didn't anticipate in terms of how long this would take? Tell us about why you think this is taking so long.
Well, the reason we're taking so long is because when we first started, it was something brand new. It's not something we knew a lot about. So as we explored it, we thought we'd use our old packing house. But the more we went into it, the more we realized that it wouldn't really be as efficient and safe as possible. So we had to do everything all over again. So we're like maybe coming April, we'll be ready to go.
There was a lot of capital investment to get the license in the first place to qualify. I know it's a pretty competitive process. Having these kinds of delays, how has that affected your bottom line?
Well, we've been real careful with how we spend the money. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. And you're exactly right. There's a lot of money involved because to get to the degree of perfection that we want to achieve takes so much expertise and modern techniques and technology. So that's what we decided we would go for, and we wouldn't sacrifice or settle for anything less.
Yeah, April is still quite a ways away. Yeah. Jari, tell me, as a patient provider, having this lag, what has it meant for you and your family?
So for us, our situation is a little bit different than many caregivers and patients. We're able to grow our own plants in our backyard. As a patient or a caregiver, you hang your hope on that date, that deadline, and you're hoping that dispensaries would open by that date. So our family was no different. I think we had anticipated that the dispensaries would open, so we slowed down some of the things that we were growing in anticipation for that date. But as a person who serves on the working group, and I've been in touch with many of the people involved with the dispensaries and the laboratories, you realize that date is very hard. It's going to be a hard date to meet. And so I understand how much work goes into putting, bringing this industry up and standing this industry up here in the state. So it's a hard balance for me because I can see how hard people are working. And yet, at the same time, I interact with so many patients and caregivers, and I see the pain, suffering, and the longing for this day to come. So it's a challenge for us, but yet I think the light is out there and the hope is still there that it's going to happen soon.
Yeah, over 17,000 people in a similar situation to what you're describing. Doctor, tell us about what your patients are telling you. It sounds like there are a lot of folks who might not be able, like Jari, to grow their own. What do they do?
Well, you know, it really depends on which island you're talking about. I think on Oahu, the patients are in desperate need of material that's been tested and that's been standardized, especially our cancer patients. And especially on Oahu, where there isn't a lot of land for growing, and it's difficult to do this kind of thing in small spaces. Patients on the Big Island have been doing this for decades. And I think there's a segment of the patient population that's become very resourceful just out of having to take care of their own health and create a product that they know works, which is no small feat, because you've got to produce the plant that works for you, you've got to produce the preparation that's appropriate, you have to come to a route of administration that works for the particular condition. And they're also adjusting that with their own medical condition and their own individual ways that they react to this substance. So it's quite a process of experimentation and discovery for the patients. And so they've been forced to be quite resourceful in this area. But that said, there's that certain segment of the population that I think could really benefit from what the dispensaries have to offer. And they're the ones that are just holding on and waiting for this to materialize. And it's tough for them.
Now, as a doctor, walk us through the process of what it takes to actually get a prescription. Because when we talked earlier before, you were telling me before the show began that you don't actually write a prescription that says, smoke 2 joints tomorrow.
Exactly, and you see that a lot in the newspapers. It's often stated that doctors are writing prescriptions for medical marijuana. The only way that we could write a prescription for this substance is if there was an FDA-approved preparation that's available in pharmacies. Then they could take that down to the pharmacy and get it filled. So under the state law, what we're really doing is just doing what's called a written certification. And the law says that the doctor performs the written certification, which allows the patient to engage in the medical use of marijuana. That's what authorizes them to possess the 10 plants now, or the 4 ounces of usable material. And then the patient also has to perform a registration with the Department of Health, and when their card arrives, they have to possess that card. So it's really the written certification that starts this whole process. And so every doctor does it a little bit differently. And the way I do it is it's always a one-on-one process within the confidential doctor-patient relationship. And we have to go over safety issues in terms of complying with the law, education issues in terms of how to produce this substance. As you may know, doctors cannot tell patients where to get this material. They cannot provide the material to the patients because of its Schedule I status. But our constitutionally protected freedom of speech within the doctor-patient relationship allows us to work out a preparation and a route of administration that is most effective and safest for the patient.
It sounds like there's a lot of sort of figuring it out on your own, though, as a patient.
Well, absolutely. And the law says that the medical use of marijuana must occur under the supervision of a physician. And I keep, or a physician, or an APRN was also added to the law. So, but I keep close communication with my patients, and we work that out together. So once they've found the strain that works best for them, then we can work on, well, is it going to be an inhalation method? Is it going to be a topical method, or an orally ingested method? Then we have to figure out a concentration, which is challenging if you don't have labs available. Once you know the concentration, then you can start working out a dose that provides a consistent effect every time the patient uses it. So they know that they're going to get a certain benefit.
The calls are already starting to stack up, but Keith, I wanted to see if we could go to, we have some slides prepared. We have all 8 dispensaries listed by county. Let's take a look, and if you could give us an update on the status of each one. We want to start with the Big Island. Hawaiian Ethos LLC, how are they doing? Where are they in this process?
They're in the process of working with the county for their building permits. The Department of Health is actually a part of that process. As the permits are applied for and go through the county process, then the counties circulate those to various state agencies, and we're one of them. So we have our sanitation branch and our other environmental health branch, which will take a look at those permits to determine whether there's any requirements under those governmental agencies. So they participate in that process, and we become aware of that within our own medical cannabis dispensary licensing program. So we're aware of what's going on in terms of, or the process, in terms of where those, where Hawaii Ethos is, as well as any of the dispensaries that do go through the permitting process.
Well, so it sounds like they've still got a ways to go. I know Richard is the other dispensary on this list. He says April, so when can we expect Hawaiian Ethos, do you think?
They're probably along the same line. They're in terms of their building permit, they're probably at about the same place as Richard is. So I would expect that they'd be probably growing and selling maybe later this year or early next year, maybe even around the time of April as Richard is.
Okay, so if you live on the Big Island, you're waiting probably about a year. Let's go to Kauai now. Green Aloha, where are they?
Middle of last month, we provided them with a notice to proceed to obtain product and begin cultivation. So they've also went through the permitting process through Kauai County and completed that. And we completed our inspections of their production center and provided that notice to proceed. So now that they have that, they are in fact growing product, and we see that through the state's tracking system, but that's where they're at.
Okay, so
it's still in the process.
It's going to be a while.
Yes, well, they're still in the process also. They've identified one retail location. I don't think that they have yet done any building out of that location, so they might be a little further along in terms of getting that part of their operation up and ready.
Okay, let's move on to Maui now. We have Maui Wellness Group and Pono Life Sciences. How are those two? How soon do we expect them to be up and running?
Those are the two of the three aggressive licensees. So they've been moving pretty well. Maui Wellness was probably the leader of the pack, if you will, in terms of being prepared and having their production center finished very early on. And they have also completed their retail location. So assuming everything is copacetic and remains as they are, we would anticipate that they may be the first dispensary to begin selling medical cannabis.
Okay, and then to Oahu, where we are now, Aloha Green Holdings, Manoa Botanicals, and TCG Retro Market One LLC. What are we expecting for those three?
Well, all three either have their notice to proceed to cultivate, or in one instance we're waiting for them to acquire their certificate of occupancy from the county. And once they have that, they'll also be provided with their notice to proceed to begin cultivation.
So it sounds like if you live on Oahu or Maui, you're probably more likely to be able to access this than people who live on different islands.
Yes.
And so if that's the case, can a patient then from the Big Island, let's say, until Richard is ready, fly to Maui or or Oahu and then take their suitcase and take it back?
No. That's against the law. And it is also something that really isn't covered under our dispensary administrative rules. Our regulatory authority is over what the dispensaries do. We have no authority or police action on what patients do, but it would be something that would be against the law. You're essentially going into federal airspace, or if you were to take a ship or a canoe or what have you across the ocean, you'd be navigating through federal waters as well. And at that point, you wouldn't be under the protection of the state.
I know you're in touch with a lot of patients. I'd imagine that having rules like that where it's sort of you're legal in one area and not in another is pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I think where the law is, the law is clearly defined in that situation, but it becomes a point of access. So if they don't have a way to access their medicine, then it puts them in a tough situation. So the law is very clear on what a patient can and cannot do, but sometimes when you're pushed against a wall, you have to make choices, and that's the whole purpose of all of this, is to provide access to patients so that they don't have to make choices that are against the law.
Yeah, it sounds pretty tough. People are, like I said, writing in. Can patients get together and start a co-op until the state gets one going? Keith, I'd imagine not.
Well, it depends on how they're considering that. The law does allow for certain numbers of patients, registered patients and caregivers, to grow in a common area. But in terms of a co-op and in terms of dispensing or selling medical cannabis, they wouldn't be able to do so without a license.
Why don't we legalize marijuana versus medical use? And why doesn't Hawaii just copy the model from another state rather than reinventing the wheel? I know that you were involved in some of the working groups on this. Why did Hawaii pursue the path that it did?
You mean the path of going
Seed
for
to
medical?
sale and going for medical. I mean, those are two different things, but let's start with medical.
Well, we've had this program for 17 years, so it made sense to try and bring it up to speed in terms of making things accessible to the patients and making our program similar to other state programs. But this question of recreational use versus medical use, I think has to be looked at very carefully. We have all these other states that are legalizing recreational use. But in my mind, the two are very different animals. Medical use is an authority that the state holds. And so the state has been able to create this medical program because of that authority. The only problem is we have this existing conflict with the federal regulation that still has it in federal Schedule 1. And we're operating under this misconception that Hawaii's program is violating federal law. And so to me, that's kind of the heart of a lot of the problems and delays that we're facing. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed in terms of looking at how state medical use affects the Federal Controlled Substance Act and these dispensaries that are putting out a lot of funding and a lot of resources with this perception that they're violating federal law and operating a criminal enterprise.
Well, Richard, talk about that. As somebody who has one of these licenses, is there a fear that you have that the federal government at any point could shut your business down, arrest you for distributing a narcotic? I mean, how do you navigate that?
We're committed to do what we're doing, but the environment that existed then is different than it is today. With the present administration and Attorney General's position, it's more risky. But we're committed, and there's no turning back. And what it is all of our teams, all the members are committed to the larger picture. So we're looking at the medical potential for cannabis. And we know that in foreign countries, they've done a lot of research, which we haven't done because of our laws. And from what we see from foreign countries, the potential is huge for people. And that's what we're committed to.
Well,
so we just have to take the chances. That's all there is.
On the legal side, we wanted to show you this graphic. State Senator Mike Gabbard wrote to our State Attorney General Doug Chin for clarification on potential conflict between our local medical marijuana laws and the federal laws. This is just a portion of the reply to Senator Gabbard, and the last line is pretty key. These laws provide no defense from federal prosecution. So, Richard, when you're out there navigating this, are you taking a personal risk?
There is that risk. You can forfeit your property, and stuff like that. But like I said, we're all committed to the long-term benefit for society and the potential good we can do. I wouldn't be in this if I didn't feel that way. And our whole team wouldn't be in it if they didn't feel this way. It's not about the money. It's about where we're going to take our society.
Doctor, can you talk about that? Also, are you taking a risk when you are suggesting, giving, I know it's not a prescription, but giving these certifications? Is there a risk to you and your medical license?
Well, personally, as long as I'm complying with state law, I don't feel like there's any risk to my medical license. There's a lot of fear among my colleagues that this will somehow put them at risk. But I think if they understand that they are not recommending the medical use of marijuana. I make it very clear with my patients that I'm not recommending that they use this Schedule I controlled substance. They are coming to me and asking for my advice because nobody else will help them. So I can help them use it safely and effectively, confidentially in the doctor-patient relationship. What I'm more concerned about are the doctors that are associated with these dispensaries who have DEA prescribing licenses to prescribe opioids and narcotics. And they are going to be aiding and abetting patients in gaining access to a Schedule I controlled substance. So what's that going to do to these doctors? I mean, not only are the dispensaries a potential risk, but these doctors who are directly associated with providing material to patients are, I think, putting themselves at pretty extreme risk. Something I don't think they need to do if the state addressed this interaction between state medical use and federal law.
What is the state doing to that end? What can they do?
Well, let's take a little bit of a step back. First of all, under the prior federal administration, James Cole, the former Assistant Attorney General, issued a memorandum that would help clarify to the federal agencies what they should do or can do regarding enforcement of cannabis laws, federal cannabis laws, when it comes to medical cannabis in the states. And essentially, the federal concern was to ensure that there isn't diversion of product, that there isn't money laundering, that there isn't a big criminal element involved in the industry. So that has given us a tremendous amount of guidance in the state to develop this program with that in mind. So our foundational principles in developing this dispensary program has been always from the beginning public safety, patient safety, and product safety. Public safety aspect is that aspect that we're addressing with the Cole Memorandum and ensuring that we have a robust regulatory system in place in the state, hopefully sufficient enough to keep the federal government away. Now, what will the current administration do? We have no idea, but we're continuing to operate under state law and what the legislature has provided us in terms of guidance, and the executive branch is just responsible for carrying that out. Likewise, when it comes to patient safety and product safety, with the implementation of the labs and lab testing, that'll provide some safe product to the patient and keep the patient safe as well. From a physician standpoint, we understand the risks that physicians take if they become more directly involved, as Dr. Otto was saying. Essentially what they're doing currently is just certifying that the patient has a medical condition. That's the minimum. And the expectation is that the patient and the physician or the APRN have a bona fide relationship so that they can carry on this continued provider and patient relationship and work out whatever those issues might be in terms of dosing and the like. So whatever may happen from the federal government in terms of enforcement of any requirements or licenses that a physician may have, we pretty much have to wait and see at this point.
You know, I know there's a lot of testing that's going on, and you mentioned patient safety and product safety at the top. A caller writing in, what is the difference between the quality of medical marijuana and the black market grade? As somebody who is a patient provider, to tell us about that. When I know that in your case you're growing your own medical marijuana for your daughter, but what is the difference between what they're selling on the street and what Richard might be selling at his dispensary?
I think there's going to be a huge difference between the black market product and a dispensed product. So as a caregiver, you know exactly what goes into your plant. You know what inputs are put in. You know if it's sprayed. You know what type of fertilizers you're putting in. If you were to go to the black market, you just by looking at the flower or the extract, you have no idea what went into that product. So without lab testing, there's always going to be a question mark on the quality and the safety of that product. When things come out of a dispensary, and this is why we fought so hard for so many years, is that things that come out of a dispensary will be grown in such a way that it's in accordance with the production, the standard operation, the typical good agricultural practices. In addition to that, it's going to undergo laboratory testing. There's a rigorous list of things in which the product has to endure before it even hits the shelves. And so as a consumer, as a customer, you have more, you feel a little bit better about buying something that comes from a dispensary versus turning to the black market for your product. Currently on the black market, you can get everything and anything that you're looking for. You can have things enhanced or laced with synthetic opiates. The black market has everything that a patient could ever want, but for ourselves and for our daughter, we're very, very careful about what we give to her. And so when people gift things to us, we never accept things unless we know how it's produced. And so the whole point of this is to move people away from the black market into dispensed products so that they can feel a bit comfortable that the medicine that they're providing is up to a high level of standard.
Tell us about the difference that this product has made for your daughter.
Oh, it's been significant, and I just can't put a word on it because she has made such a tremendous progress. 4 years ago, her life was in jeopardy. She had so many seizures that you wonder if the next one would take her life. So we did something drastic, and we realized that Hawaii had a medical marijuana program. So we had to find a doctor who would certify us, and luckily we were able to. It's become a very scientific approach to finding her the right formulations and finding the right strains for her. And when we finally found that sweet spot, she started just flourishing. And then that's when I truly knew this plant had medical benefits, and it had magical components to it, if I could say that. But it has made her life so much better than how she used to be. If people were to see her then versus now, they're just impressed at how well she's doing. And I have seniors and friends and family that come up to me all the time and just in disbelief that Pakalolo could do this. And I just tell them, you know, if you use it correctly and you very systematically and you look at the literature and you follow that, and I think with the dispensaries coming, it's going to help all of that, and people are going to get better. And I think MJ it's just an example for them to, I guess, look to, that it can make their life a little bit better. And even though she may have a disability forever, her life is much better than it was 4 years ago.
Wow. Now, I know epilepsy is one of the conditions that's covered under the certification. Doctor, can you tell us what conditions qualify a patient for this?
Well, the list recently expanded a little bit during the last session, but the main ones are glaucoma, cancer, HIV and AIDS, and now, you know, there was seizure disorder before, but now it's formally recognized as epilepsy as well. Lupus was also added, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis, as well as effects of chronic diseases, so chronic severe nausea, chronic severe pain, muscle spasms from something like Crohn's disease. I think those are the main ones. PTSD, thank you. Mm-hmm. That one was added recently through the legislative process as well. So that's a big one for our veterans.
You know, I think there might be some trepidation from patients who might not think of themselves as someone who would, as she said, smoke Pakalolo. If you're wanting to ask your doctor about this, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I think the best way is to do it cautiously, but honestly, because there are still a lot of my colleagues who are completely closed-minded about this subject, unfortunately. When I went to medical school, the endocannabinoid system, which is the basis for why this substance works, it wasn't even in our curriculum. It's just starting to show itself in some medical schools. So we're not learning about a homeostatic system in our body that has more receptors in our central nervous system than any other receptor in our bodies that is intimately involved in our health. So I think if more doctors were aware of that, then they would be open to the possibilities. But the problem is, in our profession, we're so busy. Reimbursements are going down, patient numbers are going up. We have a very limited window within the typical Western medical practice to really sit down and go over all these options with the patient. I have that luxury because I do this outside of my regular practice, and I set aside time as my community service to help these patients. But it takes a certain amount of of self-motivation to look at the science. And as Richard was mentioning, there's excellent science out there from other countries, from studies that were done in the early 70s before the prohibition started clamping everything down. And if they look at these peer-reviewed studies, they'll see anti-cancer properties of THC and CBD, anti-seizure properties, influencing sugar metabolism and diabetes, controlling anxiety and PTSD and schizophrenia. So because this system affects so many different areas of the body, we can have all of these potential benefits. And you can get 5 or 6 different effects, beneficial medical effects, using one substance that would require maybe 5 or 6 different prescription medications, all being given to the patient by different doctors and not really being coordinated very well. So we have an opportunity to use a botanical natural substance that is far safer than a lot of the medications we have available.
I want to bring in the audience, and Richard, these are 2 questions that I think you can answer. Does anyone have an idea what the price will be for medical marijuana? The caller believes it's over $200 an ounce and says that there will be a black market then. How will you set the pricing? Obviously, this is not something insurance is going to reimburse.
Yeah, and we are very well aware that we have to meet the black market price or we're going out of business. So that's a given. And we'd like to actually be more competitive and plus get a better, more safe, dependable product.
And we're not talking just about the buds. We're also talking about delivering it in different ways, oils, creams. Tell us about what kind of products we can expect.
Well, you start off with extracting from the buds oils, and then from the oils you make all these different creams, et cetera, et cetera. But what is the key is to understand what it is that you want to have the end product to contain. Then you choose your strains based on that. And then the strains that you choose has to meet the requirement for that studies have shown have the components that will give you the results you want. And it'll be confirmed with the lab testing. So there's a lot of science that goes on. And for me, it was a very steep learning curve. So so what I had to do was get myself a card, because as a CEO of a medical cannabis company, I really needed to know what I needed to know the product. So I've had a card for about 3 months. And it's really pretty interesting because I approached it from the point of view of the group of people that I can associate myself with, which is my age group. Yeah, so, and we're the ones that have all the aches and pains. So the potential for it I thought was pretty good. But as I started to get into it, I started to realize, what, this thing is not that dangerous because, compared to opioids and stuff like that, because you can just stop. If you're smoking a joint, let's say, you stop when you got too much. And because of the way it acts, it doesn't affect your breathing or get your heart stopped. That's not what it does. So you're not going to kill yourself. So safety-wise, I learned that. But I also learned some interesting things. As I went into it, I realized that I would try it in the evenings, every evening, and then I'd replace alcohol. And that was really interesting to me because that was pretty serious. So I went back to the doctor and asked him if that was a common situation. He says, yeah, it is. And it's just a side benefit, yeah. Another side benefit is that in the morning I feel perfectly good. Wake up top shape compared to drinking a bottle of wine. Holy smokes, take you to noon to.
This is John from the Big Island says, the panel just showed graphics about the dispensaries on each island, talked about how Oahu will get theirs up and running before other islands. Typical Oahu-centric politics, why will the rest of us have to wait? Now, just to be clear, the delay that you're experiencing is not necessarily because of anything to do with the state, correct?
That's right. It has everything to do with us. And it's because we wanted to make sure that the product was safe. And because I'm a farmer, I'm very well aware of the role pesticides play and potential for heavy metals and spores and fungus and stuff like that. So what we designed our facility to do is try not to use any of it. Like, for example, heavy metals. If you don't give it to the plants, to your roots, they won't get it. So that's the answer. Don't do it. Pesticides. What will it take so that you don't have to use pesticides? Well, you have to control the environment in such a way. You know, we set our facility up so that to go inside the growing area, you have to take a shower, change your clothes, get into hospital scrubs. And if you leave the area, you have to repeat that process. Anybody who comes in has to go. And because I actually farmed, I take that very seriously, and all of us take it very seriously, but me especially, because when we were farming tomatoes, high-end tomatoes went for 20 cents an ounce. It's a big difference between $200 an ounce. So I'm always afraid. So we're going to be very careful. Yeah.
Now, Richard is talking about different products. When we talk about the lab testing, whether it's an oil or a cream or a flour, each of those products needs to be lab tested. Tell us about that.
That's correct. So every product that is going to be sold, whether the finished product is the dried flour, or it's the oil or the cream or the tincture, those will have to be tested. So that's the key to ensure that the product is safe for the patient's consumption. And that's the point where the testing has to occur. It doesn't occur prior to that with the raw material that's going to be used to make the oil or the cream. It's the actual product, the tincture, the oil, the cream itself.
And there are 3 labs now. Where are they? Which islands?
2 are on Maui, and 1 is on Oahu.
So how does Richard then get his product to one of those labs, given that if I'm a patient, I can't take it on an airplane? How can a distributor then get it to a different island?
Sure. The legislature this past session worked to change the statute to allow that for testing purposes, if there isn't a lab on the island to do that testing, that lab samples can be shipped to the neighbor island where the lab is located. So in that regard, material from the Big Island would be able to be tested either on Maui or on Oahu, and that would be in conformance with state law.
The caller thinks that certification process is too complex for Hawaii ever to master. We should just import the marijuana from Colorado. This is Thomas from Eva Beach writing in. Obviously, inter-island has been given an allowance, but certainly interstate, not allowed.
Not allowed, not allowed. And we've seen a lot of reports from Colorado that Colorado has had their problems with product. And so we certainly don't want to import those kinds of problems to Hawaii. So we want to make sure that our industry is safe here. We think we can do it.
Richard, this one is for you. Chelsea from Kaneohe is asking, will the dispensaries make a profit like a business, or do they follow a nonprofit model?
It's a business, you know, so the pluses have to exceed the minuses, or you're not sustainable. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward.
Given let's go back to this whole idea of seed to sale. Why was that important when Hawaii was setting up this process?
Well, I think that comes from our law enforcement heritage and the Cole memo and trying to adhere to a very strict regulatory structure. So you want to be able to track material from the very beginning so that you can keep track of how much is being produced and where it's going. The concern here is diversion. And so I think it's great that there is going to be this type of system, also because this information is going to be very valuable so that we can look at what types of materials patients are needing, what is working best for them. Of course, from a law enforcement point of view, we have to have that piece in place. It's just a matter of how much of this regulation, how much cost is this regulation going to add to the final product for the patient?
Right. Can they stay competitive with the black market, or will people just go there?
Well, that's a big concern, along with electric costs, the costs of doing business in Hawaii. So a lot of patients are waiting to see what the cost of these final products is going to be. It's a big question right now.
Jerry, I think you can speak to this. Lee from the Big Island writing in saying, I'm worried that people will abuse marijuana and become addicted. What is the difference between someone who uses marijuana recreationally versus someone who uses it in the way that your family uses it?
I think it comes down to their intent. So a person who's using it medically, typically by state law, has to go out and get a card through the Hawaii Medical Marijuana Program. Addiction is always a concern. We were raised with the upbringing that marijuana is dangerous and it's addicting. And so when you talk to people in the community, it's always on their mind. They're worried about diversion. They're worried about children getting their hands on things from dispensaries. They're worried about people utilizing it more because it's more accessible. But I think if you're utilizing it for medical purposes, you have an ailment that you're trying to address. Recreational is people are using it without a medical intent. And so the intent is very different. Sometimes when you're working with people in the community or just patients, they're worried about the THC and the psychoactive component of the THC. And they have a misconception that the THC is what makes it recreational versus medical. So sometimes it's just understanding where they're coming from, what their fear is, and that addiction component. It's something that they fear, so it's something that you have to address by utilizing the science and just having a basic conversation with them to just figure out what's bothering them and to address it in a just one-on-one or face-to-face type of way is a great way to just get to the heart of it.
I mean, doctor, we know that opioid abuse is a huge issue in Hawaii and across the country. Is marijuana addictive?
Well, I don't think there's any good evidence that it's addictive in terms of the typical sense of the word, in terms of if you stop it, you go through severe withdrawal symptoms. There are certain medications that if you stop, you can die from because of going into seizures and severe withdrawals. That's not the case with marijuana. Studies have shown that in folks who are using it very heavily on a daily basis, you can go through maybe a 2-week period of restlessness, of anxiety, of difficulty sleeping, which passes. And a lot of, as Richard mentioned, when patients will stop this from time to time, if they need to for whatever reason, it's not a difficult thing to do. And so I don't think addiction is really the right term to use for marijuana. I think habit forming might be a better term to apply. But we have a lot of substances that are habit forming. Ice cream, I would say, is very habit forming and can be deadly for our diabetics.
Right.
So in terms of safety, nicotine, caffeine, these substances are much more addicting than marijuana is.
Richard, a caller wants to know about the business-related issues in going to opening the dispensaries, health insurance, bank accounts. I mean, this is a cash business that you're not really involving any insurance, correct?
Well, we do have insurance.
I mean, of course, you have insurance, but insurance is not giving you any reimbursements. This is not something that you necessarily...
That's true.
Right, and my understanding is that this is all cash. So how do you navigate that?
It's very tricky. Yeah. So hopefully there'll be some solutions coming up, and we'll have a meeting tomorrow, and we'll have a presentation as to some possibility of cashless potential. So we'll just have to see how that develops. But other than that, that is what you're saying is exactly right.
I mean, I would think that you're dealing with, a controlled substance, and you've got a lot of cash on hand.
Yeah.
For all of these facilities, they're going to need a tremendous amount of security.
That's right.
That's got to factor into the building that you're building, and not just you, but all of the others.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have to be very careful. Like, for example, if you're going to drive into your dispensary, you got to be concerned about how the vehicle comes in, whether there's going to be closed behind it and so nobody can see what's going on, and cameras, et cetera, et cetera. All those things got to be taken into consideration. Take another thing, like if you have to pay your taxes and you come with a big bag down to the tax office, they have to adjust their space to be safe for themselves too. So it's challenging. Yes.
And my question, I mean, how do you pay taxes on something that is legal at the state level and not at the federal level? Do you pay federal taxes on this?
There are rules, so you have to have the cost of your goods you can write off. But in the production of it. But when you're in the dispensary, for example, it's all taxable.
Okay. I mean, a lot of this, Keith, to me feels like kind of figuring it out as you go.
Some of it is. We're hoping that a potential byproduct of our seed-to-sale tracking system would help organizations like banks and credit unions become a bit more comfortable that there isn't any money laundering involved, or there isn't any diversion of product. And hopefully that could help convince them to allow for banking. So that may be much further down the road and could, again, just be a byproduct of the seed-to-sale tracking system. As Dr. Otto mentioned, we have these tracking systems that we make sure that there isn't a diversion, that we track everything literally from seed to sale, and not only the product that are consumed, but also what gets destroyed. So all the stems and seeds, for example, all the things that become wasted for various reasons, that they are also weighed and destroyed in a way that we're able to monitor and track. So we're hoping that this byproduct can help companies like Richards to be able to do better banking in the future and not make it so dependent as a cash business.
A lot of people are writing in wondering about the different forms and what is going to be allowed. Edibles, my understanding, are not allowed under the system.
That's correct.
And why is that?
Well, we've seen from other jurisdictions that there have been some problems. Again, we didn't want to duplicate those problems. Whether it's mixing and having the distribution of the material throughout whatever it is that you might be using to consume, whether it's brownies or cookies or what have you. So we took the stance of not allowing edibles at this time. And at this point, the legislature has agreed with that. And in fact, the direction largely comes from the legislature. And so that's something that perhaps could be looked at in the future, but at this point, it's just not something that's allowed. It doesn't prevent the patient from buying dried flour or oil and taking it home and baking it themselves. But in terms of that being a product that the dispensary would sell, at this point, it's not allowed.
You know, Doctor, every other question here is when are we going to have full legalization? Do you think that that's on its way? You've been working with these issues for some time.
Sure. There's certainly a lot in the state that would like to see full recreational legalization. I think in Hawaii, it's probably going to take some time. I think that Governor Ige is probably not very close to signing into law something that would create full legalization next year. So given that, I think we have an opportunity to take a look at our medical system and make sure that that's working first before we then take that next jump to recreational, because recreational is a whole different animal. And we're still struggling to get the regulation pieces in place for our medical program. Recreational is going to be many-fold larger than that. So what I'm hoping is that we can kind of take a break from this push for recreational legalization. Just put it on the back burner for one session and focus on medical use and working out these problems with banking, with inter-island transportation that is allowed for one group and forbidden for another. And sort all that out, working with the Department of Justice so that we don't have this ongoing conflict that is creating all of these problems. So I'm hoping that that's an effort that will start to catch on.
You know, Richard, as you decided to navigate this, going from tomatoes and bananas to medical marijuana now, what's been the biggest learning curve for you?
Well, I mean, it's all new to me. And I should say that Jerry has been a real inspiration for us, because I know her from being an extension agent, and I'm a farmer. So I knew what good work she was doing. When I found out about her daughter and what she had to go through to do what she's doing, it was mind-blowing. I didn't know how it was possible she could do that too. So then I started to look into it. Then I started to realize, when he was talking about the endocannabinoid system, me, endocannabinoid system, but you have to figure it out, right? You have to read the research, and then pretty soon you realize, oh, it's happening in other countries, and then you start to realize there's components, THC, CBD components, and now with terpenes. Terpenes, you know, they talk about there's an entourage effect where all of these things help each other out. Now, we gotta find out through the research what the components do. Because once you start finding out what the components do, then you can start treating and dosing. But we don't have the human trials.
Okay.
And that's where we need to be going.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This has been an amazing discussion. We appreciate all of you being here tonight. And of course, we want to thank you, our audience, and our guest, Keith Ridley, Chief of Healthcare Assurance with the State Department of Health, Dr. Clifton Otto, a certifying physician with Hawaii's Medical Use of Marijuana Program, Richard Ha, CEO of Lauola, a medical marijuana dispensary located on Hawaii Island, and Jari Sugano, a medical marijuana caregiver for her daughter. This week, we lost one of our own, an icon in the local music industry, Roland Casimero. Along with brother Robert, the brothers Casimero enjoyed a highly successful career spanning 4 decades. Coming up next, PBS Hawaii Presents will bring you a special encore of Pure Cas, which first aired on PBS Hawaii in 2013. And then on August 1st at 7:30, we will rebroadcast an episode of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox from this past April. We believe this was Roland's last interview before his passing. We respectfully send our condolences to the Casimero Ohana tonight. I'm Yunji Denise for PBS Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.